Welcome to 6 Evangelical Views of Genesis 1. This presentation is a conversation starter. I'm Kathy Clapper, a retired nurse and a songwriter. GC Veritas is the apologetic outreach of Ginger Creek Community Church. There are 25 major creation accounts in the Bible. Genesis 1 is just one of them, and may not be the oldest one. In fact, the creation account in Job possibly predates Genesis by over 600 years. The Genesis 1 creation account gets the most attention. The media gives the impression that there are only two views of Genesis 1, young earth creationism and theistic evolution, and these views are in a tug of war with each other. I know of at least 12 evangelical views of Genesis 1. We're going to examine 6 of them. Evangelicals agree in the message of Genesis 1. God exists. God is the eternal creator, distinct from his creation. God is personal, a fellowship. He has a goal in creation. God creates by his word. He's the source of light. Creation is good. God rested on the seventh day. They disagree on the when and how of creation. In fact, the disagreements are divisive. Why the division? Genesis 1 says the earth was formed in 6 creation days. Genesis is an ancient Near East document. It's important to ask how much the human author of Genesis was influenced by ancient Near East culture and creation myths and worship of many gods. Genesis was written in ancient Hebrew. Is it prose? It uses a Hebrew verb form, that is characteristic of Hebrew prose or narrative. That is, events that are sequential and chronological. But the repeated refrains are unusual in Hebrew prose or narrative. And if Genesis 1 is a historical narrative, if it's sequential and chronological, then there's a problem with the order of events. The sun, moon, and stars are not mentioned until day 4. How is it that the earth was created and filled with light and vegetation before the sun appeared? Evangelicals struggle with this. The early church fathers struggled with this also. Origen, writing in the 200s AD, said, quote, "If the sun is not yet there, how are we to understand the first 3 days with their evenings and mornings?" End quote. So is it poetry? The major characteristic of ancient Hebrew poetry is 2-line parallelism, like this example from Psalm 19. Genesis 1 does not have 2-line parallelism. As one scholar notes, this gives the impression that it is written in exalted, semi-poetical language. Scholars note that there's a 3-part structure to Genesis 1. The initial creation event, Earth's initial conditions made it unfit for habitation. Then the storyline begins with day 1. The Hebrew verb form created in verse 1 denotes an event that took place before the storyline gets underway. The storyline doesn't get underway until verse 3. So where do you place verse 1? Before day 1? With day 1? Evangelicals disagree on where to place Genesis 1:1. Is Genesis more like prose, a chronology of creation events that is historical and arranged in the order of occurrence? Or more like poetry, figurative, not historical, not sequential? Evangelicals are divided. So, what about the day itself? We need to go to the original language. This interlinear Bible shows the Hebrew on the top two lines, an English translation, Strong's number, and the transliteration of the Hebrew on the bottom. This interlinear Bible translates Genesis 1:5 this way: the evening word, the morning, day the first. What is the definition of the Hebrew word for day? According to Vine's dictionary, yom has several meanings. The word represents the period of daylight as contrasted with nighttime. The word denotes a period of 24 hours. Yom can also signify a period of time of unspecified duration. Isby agrees with Vines. In fact, all three uses are found in the Genesis creation account. God called the light day and the darkness night. The greater light rules the day, the lesser light rules the night. Your day is clearly the hours of daylight. The lights are for seasons, days, and years, that is, for cycles of time. Your day is clearly 24 hours long. Genesis 2:4, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Notice that this day includes all 6 creation days. This is clearly a period of time. Literal definitions of the Hebrew word for day are on the left side of the slide. If the days of Genesis 1 are literal, they are either 24 hours long or long periods of time. Evangelicals are divided. If the days of Genesis 1 are not literal, they are figurative, like the day of the Lord. Again, evangelicals are divided. These are the 6 evangelical interpretations of Genesis 1 that we're going to examine. I'll summarize these views rather rapidly and give some strengths and weaknesses of each view. In the 24-hour view, the creation days are 24 hours long. Creation took place in 6 24-hour sequential days. John MacArthur champions this view in his book, The Battle for the Beginning. The Creation Museum and Ark Encounter in Kentucky showcase the 24-hour view. Here's a quick look at the 24-hour view. The natural world was created. Special revelation refers to the words of the Bible. Genesis 1 takes priority over all creation texts. All 25 major creation accounts in the Bible are interpreted to agree with the 24-hour view. The Hebrew word for day means 24 hours. Earth is 6,000 years old. General revelation is subservient to the Bible. That is, the facts of nature are not taken at face value, but are interpreted to agree with the 24-hour view. Are other interpretations of Genesis 1 possible? The 24-hour view says that no other interpretations are possible because there was no suffering and death before Adam sinned. Here's what those creation days look like. In 6 24-hour sequential days, 144 hours, God created day 1, light. Day 2, expanse separating waters from waters. Day 3, dry land and vegetation. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, sea creatures and birds. Day 6, land animals and man. The order of creation events matters. This table from Answers in Genesis contrasts the 24-hour view with evolution. Notice, according to the 24-hour view, the earth was created before the sun. There was light on the earth before the sun. There were plants on the earth before the sun. The problematic 4th day. This view dates creation by adding 5 days from day 1 to Adam and 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, based on the genealogies in Genesis 5 and 11. Most scholars agree that Abraham lived about 4,000 years ago. This adds up to approximately 6,000 years. The Institute for Creation Research says, a deep commitment to the inerrancy of God's Word demands 24-hour creation days. You can't be certain of the exact date of creation. It's been approximately 6,000 years since creation. 15,000 years seems to stretch the biblical data too far. What is inerrancy? Evangelicals historically believed that the Bible is inerrant, without error. In the early 1970s, some evangelical scholars and seminaries suggested that the Bible was trustworthy for faith and practice, not trustworthy for science, history, and geography. They chose the word infallible to describe this view. The International Council on Biblical Inerrancy was founded by Christian scholars in 1977 to address this issue. In 1978, they issued the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy. They affirmed that the Bible is trustworthy for faith and practice. The Bible is trustworthy for science, history, and geography. This was signed by nearly 300 noted evangelical scholars. In 1982, ICBI looked at the age of the universe and Earth and issued 4 affirmations and denials. This is the third. We affirm the harmony of special with general revelation, and therefore biblical teaching with the facts of nature. We deny that any genuine scientific facts are inconsistent with the true meaning of any passage of Scripture. ICBI concluded that inerrancy requires a belief in creation. Inerrancy does not require a belief that the days were 24 hours long. The 24-hour view. Is creation historical? Yes. Are the days sequential? Yes. Is Yom literal? Yes. 24 hours. Strengths. It follows a simple reading of the English text. It does not require animal suffering and death before the fall of Adam. Weaknesses. It must account for the problematic 4th day. It lacks internal consistency with all creation passages in the Bible. It lacks internal consistency with the purpose of biblical genealogies, which we'll examine later. It lacks external consistency with the facts of nature regarding the age of the earth. Its cosmology, that is, its understanding of the formation, development, and structure of the universe, is based entirely on a one-part structure of Genesis 1. The day-age view says that the creation days are long periods of time. Hugh Ross, with Reasons to Believe, defends this view in his books, A Matter of Days and Navigating Genesis. Here's a quick look at the day-age view. The natural world was created. All creation accounts must be interpreted consistently. For instance, Genesis 1 must be interpreted consistently with the creation passages in Job and Psalms. The Hebrew word for day means a period of time. The earth is 4.5662 billion years old. General revelation determines the age of the earth. That is, the facts of nature are taken at face value. You can hold this view along with an analogical framework or cosmic temple view. You could also hold a modified form of theistic evolution if you mean that God created the first life, and then take the words create in Genesis 1:21 and 1:27 literally and historically to mean that God created soulish animals de novo, created man de novo. The day-age interpretation acknowledges the 3-part structure in Genesis 1. The initial creation event, Genesis 1:1. God created the universe, including stars and our sun, before his creative acts made the earth habitable. Genesis 1:2. Earth's initial conditions made it unfit for life. Earth was formless, void, shrouded in darkness, and covered with water. Then the storyline begins. God's creative acts made earth habitable. Here's what those creative acts look like. Over 6 indefinite periods of time, God made the earth habitable for man. Day 1, light from the sun could be seen on the earth's surface. Day 2, stable water cycle. Day 3, continents and vegetation. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars could be seen for the first time. Day 5, Cambrian explosion and birds. Day 6, 3 types of land animals and man. The facts of nature taken at face value tell the age of the earth. You can determine the age of a sample using radioactive dating. Roger Wiens, in his article, Radiometric Dating, a Christian Perspective, says there are over 40 radiometric dating techniques. Each is based on a different radioactive isotope. We know half-lives of radioactive isotopes. They're measured directly by counting radioactive decay. They're measured indirectly. You start with only a parent atom and then measure the ratio of daughter to parent atoms. So, how old are the oldest rocks on Earth? We know how old one ancient rock in Greenland is from 12 different studies using 5 different techniques. Notice that the age range is in billions of years. And you can see how consistent the age range is from technique to technique. Incidentally, the oldest Earth rocks do not determine the age of the Earth. The age of the Earth is determined by measuring the age of meteorites. So, how old is the Earth? And how does that compare to Genesis 1? This graphic is from Reasons to Believe. Across the top are the Genesis 1 creation days. Geologic ages are in the red to yellow bar at the bottom. This chart gives the age of the Earth, 4.5662 billion years, with a small error bar. The day age view. Is creation historical? Yes. Are the days sequential? Yes. Is Yom literal? Yes, a period of time. Strengths. It's internally consistent with all creation passages in the Bible. It's internally consistent with the purpose of biblical genealogies. It is externally consistent with the facts of nature and the age of the Earth. It accounts for the problematic fourth day. Its cosmology, that is, the formation, development, and structure of the universe, is based on the 3-part structure of Genesis 1 and modern cosmology. Weaknesses: it does not follow a simple reading of the English text. It requires animal suffering and death before the fall of Adam. The analogical view. The creation days are analogous days. God is a workman going through his work week. He works during the day, rests at night, and on his Sabbath rests in full. Our work days are analogous to God's. The length of these days is just not relevant to this purpose. John Collins defines this view in his book, Science and Faith, Friends or Foes. Here's a quick look at the analogical view. The natural world was created. Genesis 1 reflects ancient Near East culture. That is, if we want to understand Genesis 1, we must understand the culture it comes from. The Hebrew word for day refers to God's work days. The analogical view is not concerned about the age of the earth, letting general revelation determine its age. Are other views of Genesis 1 possible? Others are not the best. Why not? When someone says Genesis 1 is supposed to be clear, we should ask, clear to whom? And the right answer to that is to the original ancient Near East audience and those who share their reading competence. So we have to make a distinction between what the author of the text meant and our interpretation of that author. The days aren't ordinary days. They set a pattern for the human rhythm of work and rest. In that culture, physical cosmology is just irrelevant. The lights of day 4 were created before day 4 and are given a purpose for mankind on day 4. They mark the human calendar of worshiping God. What about ancient Near East genealogies? Collins believes that they give evidence that Genesis creation account is historical. How did the ancient Near East audience understand genealogies? Let's look at Jesus' genealogy. The first Matthew genealogy of Jesus is abridged, having large gaps between Jesus and David and Abraham. The next Matthew genealogy lists 27 names from David to Jesus. Luke's genealogy lists 42 names from David to Jesus. These 27 names and 42 names are completely different. Matthew follows Solomon's line, Jacob, Joseph to Jesus. Luke follows Nathan's line, Heli to Joseph to Jesus. These genealogies contain unrelated persons. Jesus and Joseph are not biologically related, Joseph being Jesus' stepfather. Heli and Joseph are not biologically related, Heli being Mary's father. Jesus' genealogies were flexible, containing gaps and biologically unrelated persons. The gaps are intentional. This is true of Old Testament genealogies too. Aaron's genealogy lists 22 names in one place and 16 in another. Biblical genealogies are flexible, containing gaps and biologically unrelated persons. Let's examine Moses' genealogy. We can use these passages from Exodus to calculate the year Moses was born. The time that the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. Moses was 80 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Moses was born 430 minus 80, or the 350th year the nation was in Egypt. I'll put that on a graph. Every square in the graph is 10 years. Jacob, or Israel, was a grandfather when he moved his family to Egypt at year 0. When they moved, some of his grandchildren were little. Moses was born the 350th year the nation was in Egypt. 80 years later, they left Egypt. That was year 430. Moses' genealogy is found in Exodus 6. Jacob had 12 sons, and Levi is son number 3. The names of the sons of Levi include Kohath. Kohath was born in Canaan and was the father of 3 before they moved to Egypt. The sons of Kohath were Amram. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, who bore him Moses. That's a little confusing. Numbers tells us that Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, and she was born to Levi in Egypt. She bore Moses. I'll put that on the graph. Levi was the father of 3 when he moved to Egypt. If his children were young, he may have been about 42 years old. He died when he was 137 years old, about 95 years after moving to Egypt. His daughter Jochebed was born to Levi after the move to Egypt. If she was born the last year of Levi's life, when he had lived 95 years in Egypt, can you count the number of squares between her birth and when she begat Moses and multiply that number by 10 years? She begat Moses when she was 255 years old. Jochebed's father Levi lived 137 years. Her brother Kohath lived 133 years. Her husband Amram lived 137 years. Could she have lived 100 years longer than her father or brother or husband and begat Moses when she was 255 years old? That would be a miracle. However, the only Old Testament miracle birth was when Sarah gave birth to Isaac when she was 90 years old. Levi dying the 95th year in Egypt is the least problematic year Jochebed could have been born. If she had been born when her father was younger, Jochebed would have been even older when she begat Moses. It's clear that Exodus 6 doesn't list everyone in Moses' family tree. There are gaps in his genealogy. We can't use it to calculate when Moses was born. Moses' genealogy gives his line of descent. The original ancient Near East audience understood that the purpose of genealogies is to give the line of descent, and the Hebrew language reflects this purpose. The Hebrew word for father can mean to be the ancestor of. The Hebrew word for son can mean descendant. The Hebrew word for bore or begat can refer to a descendant. On page 109 of his book, Collins says, I know of no way to figure out whether there is even an upper limit to the number of possible gaps. The analogical view. Is creation historical? Yes. Are the days sequential? Yes. Is Yom literal? No, it's analogical. Strengths. It is internally consistent with the purpose of biblical genealogies. It is externally consistent with the facts of nature on the age of the earth. It accounts for the problematic fourth day. It recognizes the three-part structure of Genesis 1. Weaknesses: it does not follow a simple reading of the English text. It requires animal suffering and death before the fall of Adam. It lacks internal consistency with all creation passages in the Bible. It is based on no cosmology, not ancient, not modern. In the framework view, the creation days are a literary device. Genesis 1 is not about satisfying our curiosity regarding sequence or chronology. It is predominantly about theological and literary concerns. Lee Irons and Meredith G. Klein defend this view in the creation debate. Here's a quick look at the framework view. The natural world was created. Genesis 1 takes priority over all creation texts. The Hebrew word for day is a literary device. The framework view is not concerned with the age of the earth. Although the facts of nature determine the age of the earth, they are subservient to the Bible. Other views of Genesis 1 are not the best. Here's what the days look like. The creation days are topical and thematic. They are composed of creation kingdoms and creature kings and the creator king. The kingdom of light on day 1 is ruled over by the luminaries of day 4, which were present on day 1. The kingdoms of sky and seas of day 2 are ruled over by the sea creatures and winged creatures of day 5. The kingdom of dry land and vegetation of day 3 is ruled over by the land animals and man of day 6, and ruling over all is the Creator. Cosmology is the formation, development, and structure of the universe. The Genesis creation account is a two-register cosmology. There's an upper register and a lower register. The upper register is invisible. This is where God lives. It's the unseen heavens He created for the angelic hosts. The commands God gives in days 1 to 6 are located here in the upper register, as is God's day of rest. The lower register is visible. It's what we see. This is where man lives. God's commands are fulfilled in the lower register. It's the created star-studded sky, earth, and earthly creatures. It's a replica of the upper register. The days of creation are in the upper invisible register. Solar time is established in the lower visible register. The framework view: is creation historical? Yes. Are the days sequential? No. Is Yom literal? No. A literary device. Strengths: it does not need to account for the problematic fourth day. It is externally consistent with the facts of nature on the age of the earth. It recognizes the three-part structure of Genesis 1. Weaknesses: it does not follow a simple reading of the English text. It requires animal suffering and death before the fall of Adam. It lacks internal consistency with all creation passages in the Bible. It is based entirely on a hidden cosmology. In the cosmic temple view, the creation days are an ancient Near East/temple text. Genesis is not about the creation of the universe out of nothing. It is not about the creation of stuff. Rather, in 6 days, God installed the cosmos as His temple, or His place of residence. John Walton explains this view in his book, The Lost World of Genesis 1. Here's a quick look at the cosmic temple view. Genesis 1 is not about the creation of the world. Is it about assigning functions to creation? In this view, the Hebrew word for create refers to functions, not the material world. Genesis 1 is an ancient Near East cosmology or an ancient Near East creation account. The Israelites did not know stars were suns. Earth was spherical and moving through space. Sun was much further away than moon, or even further than the birds flying in the air. They believed the sky was solid, and God did not think it important to revise their thinking. What was important was that God was assigning functions to creation. The Hebrew word for day means a cycle of time. This view is not concerned about the age of the earth, letting general revelation determine how old it is. Are other interpretations possible? When John Walton spoke at the ASA meeting that was held on Wheaton College campus, September 24th, 2009, I asked him if any other interpretation of Genesis 1 was possible. He said no. In his book, he argues that interpretations that correlate Genesis 1 with modern science go too far, and interpretations that see Genesis 1 as the creation of material objects do not go far enough. The left side of the slide lists ancient Near East creation texts. The right side lists features they have in common. Some of these features are found in Genesis 1. Those features are naming, separating, and assigning functions and roles in an ordered system. Here's what those creation days look like. The beginning cycle in Genesis is non-functional. Then, in 6 cycles of time, God installed the cosmos as his temple. God establishes functions. God creates the basis for time on day 1, weather on day 2, food on day 3. Note, the basis for something is a function, not a material object. God installs functions. God assigns tasks to lights on day 4, creatures on day 5, animals and man on day 6. In the ancient Near East, the temple is not necessarily a place for people to worship. It's built so the deity can have a center for his rule, a residence and palace for the gods. Deity rests in a temple and only in a temple. A reader from the ancient world would recognize the role of day 7 and conclude this is a temple text. Day 7 is the most important of the 7 days. On the 7th day, God takes up his rule and rests in his temple. The cosmic temple view, is creation historical? Yes. Are the days sequential? Genesis 1 is not a chronology of creation. Rather, it is God establishing the cosmos as his temple. Yom is a cycle of time. Strengths, it does not need to account for the problematic 4th day. It is internally consistent with all Old Testament creation passages in the Bible. It is externally consistent with the facts of nature on the age of the earth. Weaknesses, it does not follow a simple reading of the English text. It requires animal suffering and death before the fall of Adam. It lacks internal consistency with New Testament creation passages in the Bible. It is based entirely on ancient Near East cosmology. In theistic evolution, the creation days are an allegory. Since God is not limited by time, he created our universe in the past, so it would evolve into its present and future states. Francis S. Collins and Howard J. Van Til argue for this view in their respective books, The Language of God and 3 Views on Creation and Evolution. Here's a quick look at theistic evolution. The natural world was created. The Bible is the basis for the historic doctrine of creation. That is, quote, the belief that the one God who is revealed in the scriptures is the creator who has given being to the whole universe and who continues to sustain that creation in being, end quote. This view is not concerned with the meaning of the Hebrew word for day. The earth is 4.5662 billion years old. General revelation determines how old it is. Are other interpretations possible? You can hold this view along with an analogical framework or cosmic temple view, but you cannot hold theistic evolution as Collins and Van Til describe it, along with the day-age view. This is the dominant view of Christian biologists. The universe is precisely tuned for life. Evolution and natural selection can explain biological diversity and complexity. Once evolution got underway, no special supernatural intervention was required. Humans share a common ancestor with the great apes. Humans are unique in ways that defy evolutionary explanation and point to our spiritual nature. theistic evolution. Is creation historical? Yes. Are the days sequential? No. Is Yom literal? No. It's poetry and allegory. Strengths. It does not need to account for the problematic fourth day. It is externally consistent with the facts of nature on the age of the earth. Weaknesses. It does not follow a simple reading of the English text. It requires animal suffering and death before the fall of Adam. It lacks internal consistency with all creation passages in the Bible. It's based entirely on modern cosmology. We've briefly looked at 6 evangelical views of Genesis 1. All 6 believe that creation is historical. That doesn't necessarily mean they believe Genesis 1 is historical. Not all say that the creation days are sequential, nor do they agree on the meaning for the Hebrew word for day. The beautiful simplicity of this ancient Genesis passage allows for richness and variety in understanding the days of creation. We've briefly looked at 6 evangelical views of Genesis 1. The views disagree on the when and how of creation, but the disagreements do not need to be divisive. Let them be conversation starters. Remember that all 6 agree on the message of Genesis 1. God exists. God is the eternal creator, distinct from his creation. God is personal, a fellowship. He has a goal in creation. God creates by his word. He is the source of light. Creation is good. God rested on the 7th day.